I came across this video on YouTube called A Response to Gary Habermas, Response to My Chat with Paulogia, and Questions to Paulogia. Well, I saw this. It's a little channel. It's got 3 subscribers. It's got 11 views. Like, oh man, I would... it seems like this was someone who responded to Gary Habermas. Sure, I'd want to chat with this guy. But unfortunately, John 17, he has his... can't see it. But he has his chat disabled on this. So there was no way for me to reach out. So the only way I can reach out, and it's Joshua, and we're going to chat, is through this show. So I'm hoping that eventually Joshua will see this, and you will get your chat with me that you were wishing for. Now, the fun part is that this is someone I've spoken to once before. Some of you may remember this little segment from, I think it was October of 2020, when I was on the Atheist Experience with Matt Dillahunty.
Jacob in the UK is calling in specifically to prove the resurrection. And it's a perfect call for Paul. So here you go, Paul. Welcome, Jacob.
Hey, Jacob. So some of you may recall that call because it's been the source of some round and round with some apologists. It was, and I got some people hot and bothered. But this is actually Jacob from that call wanting to have a round 2, and I love that. Let's see what he has to say.
I thought it's best if I address this because my name's been brought up, and that's fine. I'm happy for my name to be brought up. Gary Habermas did a video responding to the call that I made into the Atheist Experience when I talked to Paulogia and Matt Dillahunty
on this subject.
So some of you may recall that Gary Habermas and Mike Licona did their own breakdown, takedown of this call. And in that call, in my view, Gary was actually somewhat condescending to the caller.
These guys just are not given the best data. And what bothers me the most is it seems to me when a caller doesn't know the whole case, you don't expect the callers to know the whole case. It's not their job. They want to lead them to believe there's nothing, no story here, no story there. And you're going to hear that in just a second here. And I think Mike's going to want to address what Paulogia says about the Apostle Paul with no statements on his appearance.
Okay. So the setup is that Jacob called into the Atheist Experience, Jacob from the UK. We had a lovely chat. And Gary Habermas took exception to the call and said a lot of weird things. Jacob remains a Christian, but he wanted to set the record straight on his side of things and to ask me some questions. So let's see what he wanted to tell me.
Both Paulogia and Matt Dillahunty were both very nice, very gracious. We had a very nice conversation. We had a very open conversation, and it was a really good chat. If you want to just type in on YouTube, Atheist Experience, Jacob UK, Dying for a Lie. That's interesting. So, yeah, it would be really good to see that. But what they said in the video was basically the 10 of the 12 disciples died for their faith, which is what I was taught in church. But we don't have any evidence for that. We only have evidence for 2 of the 10.
Well, just to clarify there, we shouldn't say, be wrong to say, and hopefully I didn't say that we have no evidence. What we have is we don't have any good evidence for 10 of the 12. We have legends from centuries later that are highly embellished, and most historians don't, even Christian historians, don't think happened. So there's no evidence. That sometimes gets thrown out too much. But that's a minor correction. Jacob, carry on.
2 of the 12 who died. We don't have evidence for 2 of them. Rather than 10 of them. Okay, hands up, you know, that's fair enough. I learned a lesson. So, you know, I don't really know what else to say apart from that. You know, I learned a lesson.
Isn't that great? So he called in. He had a perception from his church of some facts that he thought he knew as facts. We had a talk about it. He's now since gone away, investigated the actual facts, and come to conclude that, hey, those couple of atheists, they actually told me the truth. So no harm, no foul. He's learned more. He knows more now than he did when he called in. So that's great. Love it.
But Paulogia and Matt Dillahunty were really nice to me about it. But in the video, they was talking about Paul and James, but Paul and James weren't part of the 12. There were 4 that we got evidence for. That's Peter, James, son of Zebedee, James, brother of Jesus, and Paul. James, son of Zebedee, and Peter were 2 of the 12, but Paul and James, the brother of Jesus, were not part of the 12. But 4 of them died for their faith.
No, that's not quite correct. 4 of them, we have evidence about how they died. For their faith is actually quite a bit of a stretch. We don't know. So with my martyrdom criteria requires that, of course, we know why they died, and that perhaps that they were even given a chance to recant and didn't. That's how you know that what they died for. It's my contention that Peter and Paul died because they were caught up in Nero's conspiracy, Emperor Nero's just Christian scapegoating, and of course they were the leaders. I don't think Nero cared one bit about what they believed. And James, son of Zebedee, and the James, the brother of Jesus, again, James, the brother of Jesus, in my reading, it's entirely a political / job-related death. And James, son of Zebedee, is the only one that's left where it's, even then, we have next to no record as to why. So I don't think they died for their faith, but keep going.
So, for me, that shows me personally that, that shows me why, I mean, if them 4 were willing to die, there must have been something that happened to them to have it. So,
I would agree that the 4 of them put themselves in positions to be persecuted and killed, and that something happened to them. The question is, what happened to them, and what is the difference between them being, if we want to tell about this being sincerity, if this is a mark of sincerity, what's the difference between being sincerely mistaken and actually correct? Is there, what difference would there be in the evidence from one to the other? And as far as I can tell, they look exactly the same to history.
But then if Paul had a PTSD, because Paulogia's video, which is really, really good, which don't know why you shouldn't become a Christian, it's a good video, and I really enjoyed watching it. And obviously I really enjoyed talking to Paulogia. But there's just 4 questions that I just that I would like to ask him.
All right, I'm here.
If he ever watches this, I'm not sure if he ever will or not, but if he does, it would be great, and I'll be really happy to, have a really good chat with him again.
Cool.
But there's 4 things. First of all, Peter had a post-bereavement hallucination. The Apostle Paul had a PTSD, guilt-induced hallucination.
So I'm hoping that I didn't come across, and I hope I don't come across anyone, that I am obstinate in saying that that is what happened. Someone needed to start Christianity before Paul came around. I think Peter is the most likely candidate, and that one of the things, among many things, that could have led Peter to be mistaken about Jesus is grief hallucination, and there seems to be pretty good correlation between what we know about Peter, if the Gospels can be trusted at all, the what we know about Peter and what might create a grief hallucination. Similarly, we do know that Paul claimed himself to have an experience, so we have more of an idea of what Paul claimed. Clearly, it was some kind of vision, and PTSD stress might fit the data, but it could be 100 other things, so we don't know. But those are 2 very mundane, naturalistic reasons that those 2 might have gone around thinking that Jesus was risen again when he wasn't.
James, they all had the same hallucination about some guy. That's still, I'm not aware of anything else. I'm not aware.
So, I hope I may have paused at a funny spot where he was saying the other two Jameses, what's up with them? Why did they believe? I'm not convinced James, son of Zebedee, we can have any confidence at all in knowing what he believed, so let's put him out of the picture. The 2 we do know because Paul met them. James, brother of Jesus, and John, the apostle John, son of Zebedee. Those two, Paul met so that they knew something. If you watch the video that I put out today with a couple of doctors talking with Sean McDowell, they talk about the myriad of cases, in many cases, where a delusion spreads because one person's conviction and compelling stories can actually draw other people into their own delusion, and it starts to become a shared delusion. These do not require that the people share a hallucination, that they see the same thing. It's well researched and common, well studied, where people can basically pass on stories and people can get caught up in the moment and feel like what they're experiencing, is equally there. So that's, again, quite very plausible for John and so many Jameses. James the brother Jesus, John. That would explain that. They don't need to have had the same hallucination as Peter and Paul. Hopefully this is answering your question, and I jumped ahead from where you're going. Let's see where your question's going.
Anything else like that happening where 4 people have been willing to die for something that they've seen?
So again, I do not think we have evidence that those 4 people died in any stretch for what they saw. They died basically for being troublemakers. All 4 of them. They didn't. There's little to no evidence, I would lean on next to none, that they died for what they believed.
Paul did die of faith-related death. So did Peter. James, son of Zebedee, again, was he really, but
cool. So you agree with me on James? Yeah, awesome.
If they were willing to die for something, it shows that they were sincere. And if 4 people sincerely believe that they saw the risen Jesus, then that's quite powerful in my view. Also,
okay, so Jacob, I would love to chat with you, and I'm hoping that at the end of this we can figure out a way to actually make that happen. You can maybe comment on this video. You can email me at that live email address that we had at the start of the show. Lots of different ways you can get a hold of me. And I would love to chat with you more about this. But before we do, what I would love for you to check out is, did any of the men that you just talked about actually tell us what they saw, what they believed? Is there any historical record for any of them leading you toward these conclusions? Or are you once again basically coming to these conclusions because your pastors and teachers told you, much like the first time you called in? And let me know what you find when we chat.
That video, it talks about most scholars don't know about the early 4 Gospels.
Right.
Most scholars don't agree with who don't know who wrote the Gospels, but Irenaeus, who was a really early church father.
So his question is it going to be about gospel authorship here? Irenaeus lived around 180 AD, so, a good 150 years after Jesus died. So that's not super early, but, he is one of the earlier ones, but 150 years after Jesus died.
Said that Revelation, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, and John were all written by the same man. And that's from Irenaeus.
So, Jacob, what I'd love for you to do is go find where Irenaeus said what you just said he said. So you said that Irenaeus said that Revelation, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and the Gospel of John were all written by the same person. As far as I'm aware, you won't be able to find any place where Irenaeus said that. I have found, and I'm aware of, a place where Irenaeus said that the 4th Gospel was written by the Apostle John. That exists. But I'm unaware of Irenaeus talking about the book of Revelation or 1st, 2nd, 3rd John. So, but you might have a source that I don't know about. So maybe someone in the chat can help if I'm missing something, or you can, when we have our next conversation, you can let me know where you found that information.
And Irenaeus was a disciple of Polycarp, who was a disciple of John. So if Irenaeus...
So Irenaeus says that he was a disciple of Polycarp. That is correct. Many people believe that Polycarp was a disciple of John, but Polycarp himself never says that he was a disciple of John. Polycarp, we have not only authentic writings, there's definitely a letter from him that almost all scholars agree that was authentically from him. We also have a biography that was written of Polycarp from around the contemporary times. And we also have forged letters that were allegedly by Polycarp. None of those, whether the authentic or the inauthentic, none of them say that he was a disciple of John. So that is something that emerged later and is not very well attested. So I would love to know what your source is for that, and whether you think the source for that chain of custody, as J. Warner Wallace would say, is strong. For me, it's not very strong. I feel like that if one of the disciples was my mentor and I was writing about Christianity, I would probably say so. I know that you can't, that's a bit of an argument from silence, but it is a place where you'd expect it. So, for example, if I was to write a book about Star Wars, and I spent 7 years working for George Lucas, but my book about Star Wars never mentions that I worked at Skywalker Ranch or on the films, that's a strange omission that I would have failed to have mentioned that I had a direct connection to the direct source. So, Jacob, yeah, definitely let me know where you think you're finding that info.
I saw those scriptures as scriptural, and he saw them as if he saw them as inspired scripture written by the man who discipled his teacher. I think that's a powerful thing that Irenaeus believed that, because he's a very early church father, and Polycarp also quoted from Paul as well.
Okay, there's a lot there. Polycarp didn't quote from Paul, and again, so Irenaeus wasn't very early. He was 150 years after Jesus. And we don't have that connection with Polycarp and John that you think we had. So what I've got is a guy who lived 150 years later who is basically lending his own authentication to a book that it was already at that point circulating somewhat with his name. It wasn't much earlier than that, but at that point it was. So I'm not going to count this yet as strong evidence, but perhaps you have something more.
No, so Polycarp also quoted from John as well.
So interestingly, Polycarp did not quote from John. Polycarp quoted from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but never from John, which again is incredibly strange if his mentor was John.
So that's just my video, and yeah, I'll just see if it gets anywhere. But if not, then no problem. But yeah, it'd be great to have a chat. All right, thank you very much.
So Jacob, if you end up seeing this, I would love for you to get a hold of me. Leave a message in the comments, email me at live@paulogia.com, and let me know who you are. Let me know somehow, or maybe you can open up comments on your video. I'm sure everyone here who saw it will be very friendly and lovely to you. So yeah, get a hold of me. I'd love to chat. Maybe we could even continue this chat somewhere on screen if you cared to, or we could do it privately. Anyway, Jacob, thank you for that message. I love your heart. I love the direction you're thinking. I love that you are trying to investigate your faith to see whether it holds up. And that is something that I wish I had done far earlier in my life. So congrats on that. And yeah, let's keep this conversation going. I hope the things that I said, if you can go check those out before we talk again, that's awesome. And anyone else in this chat, do you agree with what I said? Did I say anything wrong? Let me know. Did it spark any other thoughts?